In today's episode, we have Tim Simmons, an experienced media producer and founder of Theoretically Media. His channel dives into filmmaking, music, writing, and art, all enhanced by the latest AI tools. And with over 100,000 subscribers, by the way, congratulations on that achievement. Tim believes in technology powers to elevate the independent artist's work. So, Tim, I see you're a musician. I see all those guitars in the background. And I know in the beginning, Theoretically Media was a music focus channel, right? Like you were doing Ableton tutorials, but then in late 2022, you pivot to AI. So what was that aha moment that made you decide, okay, I need to change?
Sure. I was doing, music tutorials, production, and technology based. At the same time, I obviously had come out of like Hollywood, and I was doing traditional film and video, media. But my fun, my relaxation has always been music. So, I had the YouTube channel where I was tutorializing a lot of that software. And then I guess it was in November of 2022, the first iterations of Rift Diffusion, it was called. It was Stable Diffusion Audio. And it was weird and wonky, and it's nowhere near the level that we hear today with Udio, and Suno and that sort of stuff. But I thought to myself, well, this would be an interesting way to sort of if you had one of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with these guys, like these little drum pad things. But you can essentially, use this to trigger samples. And I thought, it would be kind of cool to, try to generate an old jazz, recording, because that's kind of scratchy and not the greatest of audio fidelity, but take that, sample it, chop it up, and then you could make sort of lo-fi beats or hip hop beats out of those. So I did that tutorial that did really well. And, at that point it was a realization. I mean, don't get me wrong. At that point I was already playing around with, I think it was Midjourney V3. They were just about to switch over to V4. But as of November 2023, I totally saw everything that was coming in a flash. It was like, this is going to be huge in 2023, and I was not wrong. The tidal wave began then. So yeah.
When you reflect, right, in these early Hollywood days, how do you see, the challenges that you as a creator, a creative experience back then, with the challenges someone new that is trying to make their way into this industry faces now with the AI tools, being here, different economy, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I still hear a lot, about what's going on in town from friends of mine and stuff, and that it sounds like it's pretty dire. It's definitely an uphill battle at this point. During my era, it was it's all the same challenges, right? You're writing specs, you're hustling for gigs, you're pitching, all of that stuff. I actually feel that at this point, all of these tools really do give you at least somewhat of an advantage. So there was a movie that I helped out with on the pitch. It was called Grim Night. It was kind of a, I guess, somewhat Blumhousey kind of thing. The high concept was every year the Grim Reapers descend upon the earth, and it's very they knock on your door, they ask you for something. Of course, we follow the story of one person that that refuses to give them what they want, and off we go. So the trailer for that, it was a pitch trailer, and instead of doing a rip reel, my friend actually ended up shooting a short trailer, essentially what would be now an AI trailer. So that got sent around town, started off a bidding war. That movie never actually ended up happening, because that's the other side of it, is that you can get through that whole gauntlet and nothing happens. I mean, I've been optioned in the past, and you go out for your nice steak dinner, and then 8 months later you're like, oh well, I guess that project's dead, and I'm not going to be, my project is not going to get greenlit anyhow. So I think that these tools offer you two different paths that you can go, in terms of you can now easily make a pitch video, or to sell your project, or you can just make the project. I mean, you might have to scale it and do some adaptations, because I do really feel that all of this stuff is a different medium, but you can still get your story out and put it on, YouTube, Vimeo, whatever you want. You can self-distribute it. There is definitely heard some poking around in terms of people that are trying to figure out the Netflix of AI, of videos. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I know that people are now trying. So, but the point being is that you as an artist or creator, yeah, you can just make your own thing now. You always could, but like it's a lot of, you can increase your production budget a considerable amount now. There was that pirate vampire movie that I did recently called Dead Sea, and that was a 2-minute short. There's no way that anyone would ever greenlight a movie like that. I mean, it's pirates and vampires, like that's not going to sell. But I was able to make it myself. I think we on the video that I did on the channel, we did a cost breakdown of that, and essentially outside of me doing all of the various, like the writing, the editing, all of the other post work on it, outside of all of that, just straight material costs, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of like $500. But if you were to try to do that in a traditional pipeline, you're looking at anywhere between $130,000 to $900,000 to produce that thing. So I mean, that's where we are now, is that you can make your thing.
And I was watching actually the video walkthrough you did on Dead Sea, because I found super interesting. Usually when we talk about how I made it, we talk about workflows and I use this tool and like upscale with this tool, but you went into the one thing that every creative I know, no matter how tenured they are, hates, gets overwhelmed, which is pricing. Coming up with a budget, understanding how much things cost, or even like how much to charge. So I'm really interested in how you do put together this budget, because I think that's what every creative works, how to budget for these things.
Yeah, but I mean, it's always fuzzy. Like, so I'd come out of doing EPK and behind the scenes featurettes and whatnot for a lot of, like, if you've ever owned a sizable Blu-ray or DVD collection, I can guarantee you you have something that I produced or shot or did something in a bonus feature in there. I do miss the bonus features. No one makes those anymore with the death of physical media. But that was always something where, having had to produce those, and lots of those, because it was sort of like industrial creative, I would call it. Like, you're just constantly onto the next shoot. So, that got me pretty good in terms of, I'm so bad with Excel, but I'm good with being able to sort of break down each of like the various segments of the production that you're going to need. So I guess that sort of transferred over to doing this. So a lot of that is ballparked at this point, where you are, you got your hardline costs of whatever your subscription charges are going to be. That's sort of baseline. But the plus side there is that generally with these recurring subscriptions, like a Midjourney subscription, you can generate, a near unlimited amount, if you're on the highest tier, per month. Same thing with Runway, same thing with, Luma, etc. So, those are your hardline costs. The trick of figuring out budgeting after that, of course, is how much are you worth? And that is always something that is a little bit on the tricky side, depending on what you're doing. What I would recommend is, go out and find, your current rates of editors, VFX artists, whatever writer, and then just sort of figure out what your calculate out what your hourly rate would be for that, and your hourly rate for each one of those gigs, and then sort of combine the whole thing together. So how long does it take you to do a project? And I'm bad with time estimation, I will say. I think that's one nature of, or one aspect of all of this stuff that is a little tricky to quantify right now, just because you are working with these AI tools. And the way that I work is very it's the way that I cook as well, which is like I just have a lot of pots going at the same time. I'll have some water boiling over here. I have like something in the oven. I have a cake baking somewhere else. I like to have like lots of things happening at once. And that's one of the advantages. Like Dead Sea, I did in 4 days. And that's because I was able to do, I was able to generate video as I'm literally writing the script, as I'm literally generating voices, you know what I mean? As I'm doing music as well. So it's all sort of happening at once. So that does make like a traditional time breakdown a little bit tough to figure out. Yeah, that's something that I've been talking about a lot lately, because I think that once we get more established in this world and once we actually develop a pipeline for this workflow where it is somebody generating, say, your images in Stable Diffusion Midjourney, and then passing it off to somebody else that's doing video generation, then passing that off in, in sort of a chain, that's when we're going to have to sort of get a little more, cognizant of the hours that we're spending on these things. But right now it's just a complete free for all. So, and it's usually just teams of one or two. I haven't seen beyond the Terminator 2 remake that was done last year, where it was like 50 artists got together and literally remade Terminator 2 beginning to end with AI tools. It was kind of it's sort of a comedy, but I mean but that's a whole other that's a whole other animal, basically.
I was recently on AI in the Lot here in Los Angeles, which was this big event about AI and creativity. It was actually nice to see they had a film festival, right? And these groups, I actually spoke to Jagger Waters. She was part of one of the films, the one that actually won, but it was cool to see how these groups of people try different pipelines. They all had the same script and had to do different things, and the results were totally different. It was super cool also to see. Because like you said, anyone can do anything right now. It's a bit of the Wild West situation, which is, I'm assuming you seem to be pretty excited. I'm pretty excited, sometimes terrified. Sometimes I'm like, this is the best time ever to be alive, So that's part of being a creative, the cycle teaming. But anyway, it was cool to see, for example, some of them like took this approach of like acting with real humans and then kind of like skinning that with AI. So yeah, like you said, I think there's a lot of different kind of like workflows or pipelines that you can follow, and that's kind of like part of the exciting thing, right? I'm sure our company is reaching out to you to help them figure out how to put this together.
Yeah, a few that I've gone under a couple of like NDAs at this point, where people are definitely asking me like, it's not necessarily like, is this good? It's more along the lines of, what do you need? What would be helpful to creatives? And that's the one thing that I always like to stress in there, because the same thing, it's people come at this from so many different backgrounds and like modalities. Like, I'm not the best with 3D, but you see somebody like Martin Nebelong, who is really good with 3D, and he's like sculpting things and then running it through like a real-time generator, and like, so he's like literally taking his 3D software, running that through a real-time generator. So as he's working, it's literally like finishing off his composition. That's something that like it would never even occur to me, only because I'm not great with 3D, so it's like everyone that comes in, audio guys come in with a whole different perspective on this, your After Effects compositing VFX people come in with a whole different outlook on how to approach this. And that's what's really so cool about this and that's why, the outputs and the films that we're seeing are so varied in terms of like, the look. The one thing that, people always ask me, like, what's the best video generation platform? What's the best? Where can I do everything? And like, you can't yet, and that's good. And it'll eventually happen. There will be an iTunes or a Spotify or an Apple Music of AI video. Like, someone will figure out how to consolidate all of it together. But that is actually the least interesting thing to me, only because when we hit that point, everything sort of becomes homogenized. Everyone's working with the same tools. And the look will all be the same. And that's going to be unfortunate when that happens. I mean, there will always be people like us that see the box and try to immediately break out of the box. But, but yeah, that's, I really enjoy this Wild West time, when there are no rules and you can do like whatever you want. It's super exciting and super fun.
Yeah, and I guess, the repetition, it's something to be expected. I mean, you're a musician. I have a guilty pleasure, which is hair metal, right? I grew up in Argentina. Things got there a lot later. So I grew up with Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, all of that, and you do see this progression where you had these bands that were kind of like the originals, and then you get the copy, and then you get the copy of the copy. But I think that happened also with grunge, I don't know, whatever kids are listening these days, it's probably happening as well.
Sure.
So,
well, and I think that is something
I think it's the nature of the beast.
Oh, for sure. And I think that that's something that we're sort of at with, to take the hair metal analogy, for example, with your giant tentpole Hollywood blockbusters at this point, like we definitely have, we're past Motley Crue and we're into like Warrant and Slaughter and I can't remember any other really bad these hair metal bands. But we're into that point now with things like just I don't want to necessarily. I mean, everybody knows the films that I'm talking about. Like there definitely Marvel's Phase 4 was not. That was the White Lion of of blockbuster movies. Like it. Yeah, that's partially why I'm kind of excited about well, not partially why. To analogize. I do think that in some ways, coming into all of this AI independent filmmaking stuff very much does kind of feel like it maybe is grunge. I don't know.
We'll find out. I mean, it's the first time someone makes an analogy between artificial intelligence and hair metal.
It's
This is the word first.
Exactly.
I'm assuming one question that might pop up, especially as you mentioned Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, Suno, Udio, it's going to be the IP question, on how safe it is for, because I could do something with Midjourney, and who's going to sue me? I got nothing. They'll probably waste money suing me. But Warner Brothers, they probably have a much bigger bag and a much bigger target for lawsuits. So, and, without saying that Warner Brothers is just a random sample, right? But like, how is that being managed, or what are you saying to these folks that may want to make something public facing in a commercial, in a for-profit capability, and they're using these tools where we're still kind of walking a weird line between, is this legal, is this not, is this fair use, is it just like robbing artists?
I know that the big guys like Disney, it's obviously a big no-no. At Warner, I would presume all the same. In my day, you couldn't, like, when we were doing fax stuff for, or like in the era of like top 10 things that you didn't know about Beverly Hills Chihuahua, or Chihuahuas in Beverly Hills Chihuahua. Like Disney would not let us use site Wikipedia as a source. So obviously, legal there is very tight. They are not going to do any AI generated stuff. Now that said, I think that independent producers and not necessarily the people that are direct employees of Disney, but people that work in that Disney family, they're certainly poking around and and trying to make things not IP things for Disney, but their own things off to the side. Everybody's sort of experimenting with it right now. When it comes to the legality of it, like, and eventually, I mean, I think that at some point or another, copyright law is going to have to, like, it's going to have to be updated. It is super, it's super outdated at this point. There's going to be a lot of tossing back and forth on it, but ultimately I try not to concern myself with any of that, only because the thing that I always say is that, like, in 1977, there was a guy named DJ Kool Herc that was playing a gig at a little house party in the Bronx, and he put on a record of the Fabulous Bongo Brothers, and he just looped the beat over and over, and he got on a microphone. He's like, "Hey, I'm DJ Kool Herc, I'm blah 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 blah," and then somebody else got on a microphone and started doing it, and that was the birth of hip hop. That was the birth of rap. They did not care that essentially that drum loop, that the first and most famous drum loop was essentially copyrighted, or they didn't think about licensing it or anything. It was the creation of a new medium, or a new art form. Where we are right now, I don't know. I can't tell it. I can't give legal advice to anybody, but my thought is, don't worry about it. Like, just make stuff. And if you get to a point where you start getting in trouble for it, then you've probably made enough noise that's a good problem to have.
So, River Kids, not legal advice, not legal advice, but it's fun to experiment for sure. Now, you're talking about making a little bit of trouble creating these things.
Oh, I would say that's the other part of it too, is make and release, because it's not necessarily about the thing that you made as much as the people that are watching it, because it might not be, your grandiose, amazing, super sci-fi mega opus that gets released, but it's going to be something like a short that you put out that somebody's going to get eyes on and say, hey, I want to talk, that looks like a really interesting idea. And at that point, you're now talking to people that may green light stuff in traditional media for you. So that's that's always kind of my point. Just just release as much as you can. Just make and release, make and release.
A common sentiment, here in Hollywood, but like creatives, all the folks working in social content creation, even some independent films, it's like this sense of overwhelm, kind of like the ship has sailed. They dabble on ChatGPT, but then they hear like the weights in Stable Diffusion and Llama. So for those creatives that are watching, and that they probably follow your channel, follow your tutorials, you're one of the main resources right now on YouTube. If I search about anything on AI, on a workflow, your face will pop up.
Sorry.
Or Caleb from Curious Refugees, right?
Yeah.
It's fun. I mean, you've given such a service to the community that I appreciate it. But what do we tell the folks that are like, dude, I'm late. I feel like I'm late.
We all are, though. I mean, that's the thing, is that like there is no better time than right now, because again, like I always say that like I'm like maybe at best a week ahead of everyone, and that the other part of it is that like you and I, Caleb as well, good friends with all the curious guys, sometimes when we pop our heads outside of our little world, where we're like up T5 and Stable Diffusion 3, like all of these kind of like buzz. Oh, have you used like Live Portrait yet? Have you used this? Have you used this? When we pop our heads outside of our little bubble, and like I always imagine like somebody just walking by listening to us, like we probably sound like absolute crazy people, because I mean we forget a lot of times how far down the rabbit hole we are, but the rabbit hole is actually pretty easy to jump into and not too deep yet. So I think that right now, if you're thinking about getting into it, you can definitely, there's definitely not too much catch up that you have to do. And again, if you're coming into it with some sort of background in production at all, like you're going to approach it, you're going to find your own way into it right now. You know what I mean? Like you're going to find the things that you're going to play around with Gen 3, for example. And that's actually a really good example. So Gen 3 is a really good point, because we had Gen 2 previous to that. We had all kinds of motion controls. We had all kinds of prompt structures that had built up over the course of that release. And then now Gen 3 is here, and essentially all of the Gen 2 stuff is null and void. And we're all still trying to figure out how to prompt best in Gen 3. So it's like the slate had really just kind of completely wiped itself. So, now if you're just getting into this, you're essentially on the same footing that we all are.
Mm-hmm. And let's help folks get into this, because we want, the more creatives, the more diverse views, the better art will be in the end. So if you had to recommend, for the folks that experimented a bit with ChatGPT, maybe are figuring out how to go beyond with prompts, like if you're like keeping in mind, cost, because obviously you don't, some tools can get really expensive really quick. But if you had to think a balance between cost, but also how useful they are for you to be able to scale from there, what are the 3 tools that you would recommend folks start experimenting with?
That's a good question. Currently, I would probably say you probably want a large language model like a Claude or a ChatGPT. ChatGPT obviously has sort of the name recognition. So if you're really sort of just dipping your toe in, you can hop into ChatGPT, which you can use for free, but it will throttle you at certain times. To me, it's pretty well worth it. So we're going to bookmark that at $20, either going with Claude from Anthropic or ChatGPT. The next thing I would recommend is an image generator. If you're just getting started, I would probably recommend Midjourney. Lots of resources out there, including on my channel, to get started with that. You don't need to go with the $60 plan on that. In fact, I would think that if you're just getting started, just start at the lowest plan. I don't remember if that's $10 or $20 a month. Yeah, sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head. I am actually just on the
I
$30
remember
plan.
the
I was
$30 one.
yeah, yeah. I was on the $60 one, and then I actually kicked down to the $30 one just because I found that 30 was enough for me. So between the two, you're now at $50. And then if you're into video, it's a tough one. Right now, I would probably say to maybe try out Luma's Dream Factory, although Kling, which is the Chinese video generator, which at least as of this recording, is has got probably the best image to video model around right now. They just released an international version. Previous to this, it was a whole rigmarole where you had to have a Chinese phone number or figure out a workaround to get a Chinese mobile number and everything. But as of today, they are releasing an international version that you can just go on and start generating with. And I think that they have a whole package of plans. The one that I saw, it's not because it's not officially released now, but as of right now, as of this hour, and that's AI in a nutshell. As of right now, and this is not the thing, but in 2 hours, the world completely changes. It's just AI in general. I think that what I saw was like $118 for 6 months of use, which actually isn't too bad. So I think I calculated that at somewhere around the neighborhood of $20 a month. So between that, you're looking at what, $70 a month as your kind of like basic starter package, and that's not too bad considering that that's a couple of streaming services. I mean, just that you're probably not going to have time to watch your streaming services once you get into all of this stuff because you're just going to be too busy making stuff.
It's true. It's true. And we were talking with Tim Jablonski from Little Monster Media. They do YouTube optimization. They're like working with channels. And, we were saying like, if you're doing YouTube, if you're doing content creation, you got to be super passionate about it because literally, like I dream sometimes about optimizations. So I'm sure that happens to you and anyone else that is working on YouTube. But you do bring a very interesting point. I didn't have this on my questions, but kind of like the light bulb just went on, which is today is, I'm not even aware what day is today, but let's say it's July 20 something, right? And I don't know if this happened to you, but one of my first learnings, I started YouTube like 10 years ago in a cooking channel in Argentina, which became one of the biggest ones. That's how I ended up in LA, right? But back then we'd shoot 3 weeks in advance, 4 weeks in advance. We'd shoot as many videos as we could, because we wanted to have kind of like this 2-week buffer. I started like that with Creativity and Robots, and what I quickly found out is that many times recording the week before, by the time it was going live, it was outdated.
Dead.
So when you're recording your content, do you find this constraint?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fast. That's the one thing that like I think has been noted about me. Is like I'm like literally gonna shoot a video later today and have that up tonight with a whole other thing. So I just did the live portrait tutorial yesterday. I've got another video to video process that I'm gonna do today, and then kind of a news thing tomorrow. So yeah, but I've definitely had moments where like Hedra, for example, that was a face animation software that I talked to them, and I really like those guys a lot, and I really wanted to do that video, and then I can't remember what happened. It was like a Monday where I don't know, everything went wrong and I didn't get a chance to, and then by Wednesday when I was sitting down to do it, everyone had already covered it, and it kind of felt like it was old news to me, so I felt really bad about it. But I have seen some stuff that they've got coming up in the future, so I will definitely cover that. But yeah, the way I generally work, because I'm on the East Coast, so I'll wake up in the morning, scroll through, all of my various feeds, see what's happening, see what's interesting, because I'm like, not by choice, but because my wife and I do a 5 a.m. boot camp, I'm up super early, not by my choice, but yeah, it sucks. But so by that point, like at 6 a.m., I'm already up rolling, and I've got essentially my bullet points for the day, so I can start shooting at 7 a.m., whereas you guys on the West Coast you're still asleep, or maybe just going to sleep at 4 a.m. So that's kind of how I'm able to.
Not anymore.
Yeah. That's kind of how I'm able to keep that, that pace going. So yeah. And then other than that, it's just been a lot of like, again, AI tools. Like, I use Adobe to edit, and they release their, they have an AI tool in there that will auto transcribe everything that you've said. So I can go through and essentially, like text edit my way through the whole thing. So yeah, it's great. Like I would not. I would probably. I mean, I did it before that, and it sucked. I probably would have burnt out a long time ago had that tool not come around, because I'm just able to crank it out. The other thing is that I don't work with a team; it's just me. So it's not like I'm shooting something. The turnaround time of packaging it all up, sending it, wherever in the world, having an editor cut it and send it back to me. I don't have that lag time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's impressive because truly the volume, but also quality, right, of the content you're putting out. And again, if you don't know Tim's channel, which I'd be surprised, I'm putting it on the links because it's truly, I think even for folks in the AI space who are doing their content, you're kind of like the go-to guy for this specific thing that I think we're all like, how is he doing it? Which is, it seems like you catch up on every AI tool that comes out before anyone else does, with the exception of Hydra, right? You just said maybe not that one, but like, what's the secret sauce, if you want to share with the class? How do you keep up?
I have feelers out at this point now. And a lot of times I'm seeing the news. Like I said, it really is waking up at 5 a.m. Like, I mean, it sucks, but that's kind of the secret sauce, is that I just get eyes on something before everybody else does. I get a couple of like reach outs at this point now. People will, hey, we're releasing this. The funny story was with Udio. A couple of days before Udio was released, it started leaking, and people were posting up these samples and going like, I can't say what this is, blah, blah, blah. So I decided to kind of have a piss take on it. So I made a video, because everybody on Twitter was like, like, I'm under NDA, so I can't talk about it. So I made a video where I was like, I'm not under NDA, I can say whatever I want. And like, and I was posting up the samples and speculating on it. And a few hours after I posted that video, I got like this mysterious email that was like, we'd like to put you under an NDA. So I ended up having a talk with the Udio guys, and then and they were like, hey, we'd like you to make a video about the release. And I was like, okay, cool. As it turns out, like, I was like, when are you guys releasing? They were like, tomorrow. I was like, jeez. So at like 3 o'clock that afternoon, I started my Udio video, and I had it up at 9 a.m, the next morning. So I was literally under a 24-hour NDA with those guys. So, but that's, rarely does that actually happen. So,
do you have any system? I mean, you said to reach out, but I'm assuming, once you have done like 100 tools, it might be hard to keep up, especially because some of them, there's no different value proposition, right? They seem pretty similar. It's just a matter of what's cheaper or which one did you find first. So how do you have any sort of system to organize? Like,
not really. It's just kind of, it's all personal. Yeah, it's all just personal. What do I see? What do I think is cool? And I always try to make sure that the way that I look at it is that when I'm making a video, there's always this thing about like, especially in the YouTube space and that whole side of the meta where it's like, who are your audience avatars? Who are the people that are watching it? And I've never thought about that ever. Like the way that I've always looked at it is like I am aware of the audience, but at the same time, really, I'm kind of talking to me, and me is you and you is me. And like, that's why I think that everybody that watches the channel kind of is like pals that would get along in a bar, because we're all kind of the same people. So, so anytime that I see something, it's just a judgment call on my part of like, is this cool? Is this not cool? And then, sometimes things will come along where I'm like, well, I really got to get on top of this. Like if Runway drops something, or, if Pika emerges from the ashes at some point, I'll be all over that. So there's like the big news stories. And then there's the sort of up and comers. And like, I'm sort of like picking and choosing there, what I think is cool. And then there's, don't get me wrong, there's a giant list of like things that I want to cover that I have not had time to. So the one that I'm doing today actually is Skyglass, which I've been wanting to do this video forever, and I finally got a chance, like a minute to play with that. That's actually an iOS app where it essentially does all of your chroma and green screening, so you can just turn it on and put yourself as a character in a background in any generated environment. So it's like having a little mini version of the volume on your phone. It's awesome. So
Tim, we're almost wrapping, but I do have one question for you as someone that's been here in the Wild West, just getting into the weeds of stuff, which is, what's the main misconception about generative AI that you would like to say, hey, this is a misconception?
that it's easy. It's never easy. That it's just prompt a thing and then this magic, amazing, perfect finished thing appears. It's never that. It's great. It's a great inspiration tool. It's a great raw materials generator. That's the way that I like to look at it. Even again, I just had calculated this up with Dead Sea not too long ago. I think there were a total of 33 AI generated shots with the software Kling that I used. And the amount of generations was somewhere in the neighborhood of like 120. So, that was the shot ratio. So, and even then I was, had to cut moments out of it. So the way that I kind of look at it, like you're just creating a whole bunch of like raw material that you then are sculpting into a piece. So yeah, it's not, it isn't, prompt in, make me a Batman movie, and then poof, there it is. Like it's still a ton of work. It's manageable work now for small teams of 1 or 2 people. Again, there's no way that I would have been able to accomplish that movie in 4 days without these tools. But it's still a lot of work. It's still like you're still looking at like, I think that was upwards of like, I can't remember, like somewhere between 14 and 20 hours or so. But again, that's, that was work. So,
yeah. So, Tim, what's next for you, and where can folks find out more about the work you do?
What's next for me? Today is another video. Tomorrow is another video, and then we just keep going. Somewhere in there, I'm working on doing more projects like Dead Sea as well. I did another one called Below Bonghua with Dave Clark as well. So I do want to. There's a part of me that, as I do these tutorials, there's always like a little mini piece that I end up creating through these things, but I do miss doing sort of more like larger pieces as well. So that's something that I'm going to try to fit into the schedule more often. I feel that a lot of times I teach about this stuff a lot of times, and then in the researching, making videos about it, and the tutorializing, a lot of times I don't get to play with the tools as much as I would like to. So I'm trying to put trying to carve out a little more time for that. So yeah, and then in terms of upcoming, more tutorials on the channel, which you can find at youtube.com/@theoreticallymedia.
And we'll be adding all the links on the notes so folks can access. Again, I cannot recommend Theoretically Media enough. Like, it's an excellent channel to get started. And one thing I like, it's nice to say nice things, that I like about the work you do is that I have a big beef with FOMO, and I have a big beef with people online that say, ChatGPT just killed, Microsoft Excel, and if you don't know it, no one loves you, so might as well die. And in your case, I feel you take a very down-to-earth approach in which you're sharing the knowledge rather than telling folks, I know and you don't, buy my course. So I appreciate that. I think we need more people like you in this space, and I'm very glad we got to talk. I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate you popping in and Creativity and Robots. For the rest of you, thank you for listening to this episode. If you're on Spotify, Apple Music, and any podcast platform, you can leave a review, which is super helpful. In YouTube, you can subscribe, but I'd rather you leave a comment telling us what you want to see. And also, make sure you check Theoretical Media again and again and again. I'll reinforce it. So, my name is Juan. This was Tim as a guest. This has been Creativity and Robots. Have a good one.
Bye.
Amo la creación en mi pantalla, bits y bytes en danza, todo brilla, cada código que escribo canta. Sabor a cumbia.